Welcome back to BadgerBlitz TV, your Rivals.com destination for all things Wisconsin athletics. I'm Matt Perkins, joined by BadgerBlitz publisher and editor-in-chief John McNamara. Good to see you as always, John.
Absolutely. Makes Mondays great, man.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And it's a great Monday for the Badgers as they have landed what should be the final piece of their 2025 offensive line class. They got him this morning or afternoon, depending on where you're listening. Hardy Watts, he immediately becomes the highest ranked commit of that 5-man offensive line unit and solidifies what I think is a pretty strong class for A.J. Blazek's first cycle in Madison. All signs for a while seem to be pointing to Watts ending up at Michigan, but John, he's a Badger, so what turned the tide?
It's a good question because, like you said, Matt, I thought that Wisconsin did an excellent job during his official visit, and something that was unique about that was that was the only school he took official to that he hadn't seen previously. Wisconsin tried to get him up in the winter. They tried to get him up in the spring, and both of those kind of fell through. So that time that he was able to spend for his official, you know, they packed a lot into those 3 days because they hadn't gotten him up there. They hadn't, got him around the guys and all the coaching staff. So I thought Wisconsin did an excellent job for that visit. But then, like you talked about going into Michigan, talking to people, it seemed like the Wolverines kind of stepped out on top. And that was kind of the indications that we got from people a little bit closer to his recruitment. But something seemed to sway, I guess, in the last 24, 48 hours, probably closer to 48, in Wisconsin's favor. And I think largely that has to do with A.J. Blazek and the work that he's done, Casey Roebuck, the work that he's done in that recruitment. And like you said, this is the last piece of this offensive line class, but it's arguably the biggest piece. I think Watts, in terms of college ready, is probably the most ahead of the curve in that pack of 5 that Wisconsin currently has right now. He's probably more of a luxury than a need, but you absolutely take a guy like Hardy Watts anytime you can get him, regardless of the amount of commitments that you had. He's going to start at guard, and I think that he would be my pick for someone who sees the field early in this 2025 class, not just with the offensive line, but I think as a group, as a whole, he could see the field, one of the earlier guys.
Yeah, as an interior guy, I think, they've picked up 2 pretty college-ready interior guys between him and Emerson Mendel in the last class. And, 10 scholarship offensive linemen in 2 classes. They are really starting to roll them in. And that seems like, they got 1 commit in the portal this past cycle for the offensive line, but I do think they are going to hope for and aim for 0 portal offensive linemen moving forward in terms of additions, because these are 2 big classes with a lot of really big upside players. Staying on the offensive side of the ball, though, last week when we were here, we talked about Eric Schmidt, the punter/kicker from Milwaukee. He finally committed last Wednesday. If you've been listening to this podcast, you know how I feel about that. He's the nation's #1 punter and #6 kicker, and had a lot of interest from Michigan, again, Notre Dame, and some other top programs. So what do you think put Wisconsin over the top for him? It sounds like he's going to be effectively a gray shirt for Wisconsin.
Yeah, kind of that old school gray shirt, although they'll have him up there for that spring semester, before he goes on scholarship. So, to answer the question, he took an official to Boston College, and Boston College offered a full ride. And, he said he loved his time out there, loves that coaching staff, loves that opportunity. But ultimately, I think he wanted to stay close to home. And that's something that he said, developed a really strong relationship with the Wisconsin coaches as well. He also said he wanted to go to a school that was a little bit bigger. And, Boston College, I guess, is a little bit smaller than Wisconsin. I don't know that for sure. I didn't look at the numbers, but I just trusted Eric when he told me
it
that.
It is. I went to Boston College football camp when I was in high school.
Okay.
And it is, definitely not the biggest school. So, I went to Wisconsin for a reason, but and not to Boston College. So yeah, I'm right there with him on that.
Yeah, and like you talked about, man, I know that you're super high on him, and some people might look at it and on the surface it's a walk-on who is a kicker, but he's one of the more unique specialists that we've kind of talked about since I've been doing this, because he can kick, He can punt and he can handle kickoffs for you. And I legit think he's going to have a shot in all three of those areas. And Wisconsin's just kind of bringing him in as a guy who, let's just see where he fits. I think immediately you might see him on kickoffs because I think Johnny Smith, I hope that's the correct name. We didn't hear a whole lot about him. I think he's a 6-year transfer from the West Coast, San Diego State. I'm probably saying a bunch of wrong things about him, but I should be here for fall camp. He's expected to kind of handle the kickoff duties his last year. So I think that Schmidt can potentially solve that for you the following year. Nathaniel Vakos will have one more year, I believe, when Schmidt arrives. And then Atticus Bertram's, it's a big season for him. Like if he struggles, then Schmidt comes on and he probably competes for time right away with him again, right away in 2025. So, to have that versatility, to have a guy that can potentially lock up 2 of those 3 spots, I think it might be crazy to say 3 of the 3 spots, but look, he can do a lot of things really well. Coles has him as the number 1 punter in the country and the number 8 kicker. So, to be able to lock up those spots and not have to probably think about them a ton is a significant benefit for the entire program.
I think if I was ranking the ones that he would lock up first, I think kickoff specialist would be the first one that he would lock up, followed by punter and then kicker. Just because, like you said, he's the number 8 kicker. Don't get me wrong. He's like a fantastic kicker, but number 1 punter in the country is something special. Now, we do know that Coach Fick does have ties to the Australian punting factory or whatever they call it, where all of these crazy Australians seem to come from. And so, which is how they got Bertram's. So I think that is always something to keep in the back of your mind. But if you can use one scholarship on someone who actually can do all 3, and we've seen a couple rare people in college football history, or at least over the last 20 years, be able to do so, that's a weapon. And that is a great use of a scholarship. So I am, like I said before, many times all for it. 2 additions for the Badgers, 1 subtraction, a bit of a surprise flip for Rukeem Stroud, who stays or decides to flip back to his home state, UCF in Orlando. That happened right after, John, you and I recorded last week. Any more words, as to what happened there to sort of put a, end of a chapter marker there in the Rukeem Stroud to Wisconsin era?
Well, he said it was a business decision on his post. So I think you might be able to take him at his word. There is the angle of he wanted to stay closer to home. But if you look at his top 2, it was Wisconsin and South Florida. So that bridge was kind of crossed during his commitment to Wisconsin. So if he made a business decision, I think that people can read with that what they choose to do. But that's a significant loss for Wisconsin, right? I mean, we just had an article come out this morning about, the 2025 class and kind of where it stands. And now cornerback is kind of a question mark because right now you really just have Jamari Washington. Remington Moss, I think that he'll start at corner, but he's a guy that's kind of just a defensive back in my book. I think he could play corner. He could play safety. I think he could play nickel if you needed him to. He could probably play dollar if you needed him to. He's got a big frame. If you want to put some weight on him, I think he could do that. So just kind of a defensive back, I would say, for Moss. But I think the biggest thing is that, once they got Stroud, once they got Washington, they told at least 6 other cornerbacks to not come because they were essentially filled. They were basically looking at, Trey Poteet, who wound up at Tennessee. And then Zay Gentry, who's still out there, SMU commit, who I think will likely stay close to home, but that one's not officially wrapped up just yet. But, when you had, like I said, Stroud in Washington, you told 6 other guys, hey, we can't have you come out here. We don't have a scholarship for you anymore. And that hurts quite a bit because now you'd probably like to revisit one of those 6, but of the 6, only 1 is still uncommitted. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't make a run at someone just because they're committed to a different school. But it'll be interesting to see if they revisit one of those 6 in the fall, if someone new pops up on their radar. It's not a terrible position to be in because, you'll have all fall to maybe look at someone who's a late bloomer or, I know that Pat Lambert and Paul Haynes, they love those, 6'2", 180-pound guys that maybe pop up a little bit later. So that could potentially happen. But It does hurt when you said to a bunch of other guys who you liked, we're good here. And then a couple days later, you're not good there. So thus is recruiting, I guess, the twists and the turns.
Yeah, it should come as a surprise to no one that kids are flipping and decommitting 6 months before signing day. So, I mean, I think you've mentioned Corey Costner as someone that they could look at. I don't know if they're able to revisit Josiah Williams-West. I don't know if the ship has sailed there at all, but he's still uncommitted as well. Any other names to keep an eye out for?
Yeah, Costner was kind of the guy I looked at, when we were doing it this morning, only because he's uncommitted. And he's a guy that Wisconsin had up in the spring. And, they liked him quite a bit. He's another guy, and, you've heard this before, brings that versatility where I think they like him at corner. But I know Alex Grinch likes him at safety as well, too. So that's just kind of another defensive back that they could bring in the mix. So, with that versatility, because he's uncommitted, because I do know that the staff was high on him at least at one point, maybe you stay in touch in the summer, maybe try to get him up in the summer for an official, or maybe, early fall for that, first home game that Wisconsin has. I do think they'd like to add another true cornerback. Maybe they can get Gentry and then their problems are kind of solved. But I think that's a position they'd like to add at least one more player to, and they have a lot of time to do it. So it'll be interesting to see if someone pops on campus in the fall. Like I said, a late bloomer, a guy that, wasn't on the radar, but they love the size, they love the upside. So a lot of different ways they could go. Not the end of the world for Wisconsin, but they really felt like they had a great group and a bunch of tier one guys when they had Stroud in the boat.
All right. Well, I got a couple more 2025 questions for you. Introducing a new game today that we're calling Defensive Line Panic Meter on a scale of 1 to 10. Where are we today, John?
Like 10 being the highest?
Yes.
I mean, I guess I'm like at a 4, but I guess I'll preface that by saying I don't really panic. I'm not invested into how Wisconsin does. I know I got to do like the whole journalist spiel, right? But like from how Wisconsin's addressing this, from like how they're addressing this class, I think you could take a big sigh of relief if you're a Wisconsin fan when you got Torrin Petaway back. That was an odd midnight type flip to Minnesota. I mean, Wisconsin fans have their opinions on PJ Fleck, so I don't have to dive into that. I think that it had that Rob Booker feel to it, like it was going to resolve itself in the end. But it's good to keep those type of kids home, right? I mean, that's not breaking news. Getting Wilnerson Telemak, look, that was a kid who ranked up pretty high on Wisconsin's board, and to get him, a big, tall, long, rangy kid who you can kind of do whatever you want with on the defensive line, that's significant. You'd like to get a guy like Kyler Garcia. He goes to Indiana. That's kind of a head scratcher because that's, head to head, I think that's a battle that Wisconsin traditionally wins. Drayden Pavey is set to decide tomorrow, which is July 2nd. It looks like Purdue will come out on top for him. He took an official to Wisconsin. And then the name that we've talked about a bunch is Cade Petrak, kid from North Dakota. Again, I feel like the people I've talked to think it's Oklahoma, but that hasn't happened yet. So what is holding that up? Cade knows, but he doesn't really tell people, at least doesn't tell media people. So again, I talked about this last week. That's his choice, and I'm totally fine with it. I don't want to make it sound like it's a bad decision. He's a bad person, anything like that. It's not anywhere close to that, but he's just a kid that doesn't talk. So it's hard to get that firsthand information from him. But I guess my biggest thing with that is Wisconsin's prioritized him for a very long time. And I think Oklahoma's done the same. But if Oklahoma's a leader, I'm curious why it hasn't happened just yet. And I think that Wisconsin feels like it's likely in second place, but it's a fight that they're continuing to fight. So, if you were to get Petrak at any point in July or in the fall, then all of a sudden that defensive line room turns into a position of strength, I would say, in this 2025 class, even though I know that there's a lot of people out there who would love them to take 6 or 7 and just kind of see how it filters out when they get them on campus.
Yeah, I was gonna say, give me a percentage chance the Badgers land Petrak, because after the way they've turned the tide on Hardy Watts, like I don't put anything out of reach when it comes to closing on a kid who we didn't necessarily think we were gonna get. I say we,
Yeah,
but the Badgers.
yeah, right. Like I guess you could say you could play it real safe and say 25 because he's got 4 schools left, and I think that adds up to 100.
Four, it's Oklahoma, Wisconsin, Nebraska, and who's the fourth?
Kansas State. So he's taken officials to all 4
okay.
of those schools. Early on in the month, you thought that he'll go to Oklahoma and he'll go to Wisconsin, or maybe it was in reverse order. I'm sorry. I think it was that correct order. And then I'll decide from one of the 2, but he took all 4. So I guess that all 4 could be considered. If I had to give you a percent, somewhere like 30, 35%, but like you said, like they've won these type of battles before, right? And they have surprised people before. So I think that one is still open. But today I'd say Oklahoma, but that one's certainly not done yet. And that's one that I know that he's kind of in a category of his own now. I was told, kind of Trey Poteet, Cade Petrak are like, we'll take this guy at any point, no matter who we have committed. And obviously Poteet's committed to Tennessee now, so it's Petrak out there. So, I mean, if Wisconsin gets a couple in the next couple of days, which I don't expect, outside of Hardy Watts, which happened earlier today, they'll have room for him. So they'll continue to fight that battle, and we'll see how it turns out.
All right. Well, let's flip over to men's basketball. You were over at the Kohl Center for the advanced camp this past weekend. I've got a bunch of questions for you. So we'll start here. Who was the best all-around player that you saw over the weekend?
Yeah, Zach Kinziger, the guard that Wisconsin has committed in this 2025 class. Look, great guard gets a lot of heat. You could say it's deservedly, not deservedly, whatever. But that was a good early evaluation, and someone I think that has proven this spring on the EYBL circuit that he belongs with some of the top players in the country, some of the top guards in the country in that 2025 class. I know that we had our rankings come out in the last couple of weeks or so, and Zach's now a Rivals 150 kid, so like he's a really good basketball player, and I think he's an even better fit for what Wisconsin wants to do. And again, that's cliche, and you go down the line of Brad Davison and all these perfect fits, but I think that he does all the things that Wisconsin wants on both ends of the court. He's going to be a guy who can shoot the basketball, but a lot of times, and I've saw this in the last 2 years at Wisconsin's advanced camp, he goes out and he rebounds and then start tempo, can initiate that offense. So we kind of have him as a combo guard. I think he's likely a 2, but he's more than comfortable handling the basketball as well and kind of getting the team into his offense. Real heady player, can shoot from the outside. During the advanced camp, I mean, he took it to the paint a lot and finished in contact. He's stronger than he was a year ago. He's stronger than he was when I saw him, in the winter for De Pere too. So, that one's looking better and better as time goes on. And he, at least in my opinion, was the best player in Madison on that day.
Who of the guys that you saw has the most athletic upside?
Probably Christian Wiggins. He was the other offer guy who was up at Wisconsin's camp. And that's not super common for a guy to have an offer to be uncommitted and then go camp somewhere. So that's, I think, is a great sign for Wisconsin. We have a story up on him right now on BadgerBlitz.com that kind of talks about his experience at Wisconsin's advanced camp. But a lot of times, Wisconsin's had guys who were committed. They wanted to work more with the staff. They're in-state guys. Hey, sure, like Kinziger, right? Let's go camp. Let's get better. Let's get around the coaches a little bit more. But a lot of times, those type of guys are guys who I'm going to camp here in order to put myself in a position to be offered. So, like I said, Wiggins had the offer, chose to camp. I think that's a very good sign for Wisconsin. 6'3", 6'4", shooting guard. Really bouncy, a natural athlete, can finish at the rim, really explosive in the paint, can shoot it a little bit. I think you'd like him to be a little bit better shooter, but again, just a kid that's going to be a junior next year. So, I think he proved why he was one of the first guards that Wisconsin's offered in that 2026 class. He looked awfully good.
Donovan Davis walked away with a scholarship offer. He's a 2027, I think the first one that the Badgers have offered for that cycle. Do you think he ends up being a truly national prospect, as we've seen, some kids in the state of Wisconsin be over the past decade, really?
He's got a chance. I don't think that he's a no doubt guy like a Jalen Johnson, Con Knipple, where you see him and you're like, yeah, this guy, he's going to blow up at some point. So I don't want to say no, it's not going to happen. I think he's certainly got a chance, but I'd like to see more of him than just one day of basketball, right? But obviously he did enough to earn an offer from Wisconsin. It was kind of trending that way. I think that, I was keeping that live blog going on the BadgerBlitz message board. And I said, if anyone walks away with an offer today, it's likely going to be Davis. And that proved to be true. He's got legit size, 6'6", 6'7", 200 pounds, just going to be a sophomore next year, this upcoming year for Freedom High School, which is a small high school in Wisconsin. Nice inside outside game. He can shoot a little bit, but that needs to get better. But, in the paint, he's got a few moves that he's comfortable with. I saw him finish a little bit with both hands, and he's he's extremely well put together for a kid in the 2027 class. This isn't like a string bean where you are projecting a bunch. He's got some good weight and strength on him right now. I think Wisconsin was very intentional. Well, I should preface that if you go into these camps, they put these guys into teams, right? So I think there were 13 teams of 9 or 10 guys, and a lot of times they'll stack these teams with, we want to see the better guys play with the better guys. I think there was a reason why, Wisconsin put Davis with Kinziger, and those two were talking throughout the entire day. They were kind of side by side throughout the entire day, and I think that they developed a little bit of chemistry there. And obviously, with a guy like Zach, he can figure out where the matchups are, and he can figure out what guys can score the basketball. So I think Zach did an excellent job of looking for him throughout the day and a lot of that 5-on-5, and not that helped him get a scholarship, but he certainly put him in a lot of good positions to succeed. And I think Wisconsin saw that. And it's a great early offer, right? And I think he's certainly someone that Wisconsin can get on campus because it is an in-state kid. He's going to get more offers. They'll start to come during the July period. But I like the offer. I think it was a great offer. And why not, right? He's got a lot to like at that age. He's an in-state kid. He makes a lot of sense. So that offer to me made plenty of sense after seeing him play.
You saw Will Garlick there. He is committed to the Badgers, but is coming off of an injury. What's the latest on his recovery?
Yeah, it sounds like he's still a little ways out from going 5-on-5. He was without a boot, was walking around just fine, but I think they're being very cautious there. Unless I'm missing something, I don't anticipate him to play in July. I think that's like a 0% chance. I think that's just kind of off the table. I talked to his head coach a couple weeks ago after he committed, but I think the goal is for him to be able to be full go for his senior year at Middleton. So he's got plenty of time there. And, he talked to me when I talked to him after the commitment about, there's kind of a silver lining here of me being able to lift weights and to shoot a bunch and to do a lot of those different things. And then the coach kind of reinforced that too, of like, hey, yeah, he can't play EYBL. He can't play against some of the top kids in the country, but that is an absolute grind of travel and hotels and not eating the best and not being able to get in a weight room. So, yeah, I think every kid would love to do the EYBL circuit and play and all that stuff. I get that, but with Will being able to use this to his advantage of getting bigger, getting stronger, getting shots up, working on the things they can do without the travel, without the commitment to play on the top circuit in the country for AAU. I think he's trying to use that to the best of his advantage, and getting a chance to see him on Thursday. He's well put together. He's all of 7 feet tall, and he's not a kid where maybe like a Nolan Winter where you say, hey, we got to add a ton of weight to this guy. Yeah, he's gonna need to get stronger. He's gonna need to get put some muscle on him and some pounds. But there's a lot there already to work with, and I think that maybe his numbers weren't super eye popping as a junior, but there's a lot that he does that I think will fit Wisconsin very well. And I think there's a reason why he was a big target for them in 2025.
All right, last basketball question here. Of the rest of the prospects that you saw, who do you think has the biggest chance to blow up this coming season?
Yeah, it wasn't a particularly loaded group. Two of the kids that I wrote about were Andrew Jensen, 2026 center from Kakona. He's ultra athletic for a 6'9", 6'10" kid. He can jump out of the gym. I mean, there were some transition baskets where, a large thud happened at the other side of the court and everyone turns their head and there's screaming on the other end. I mean, he's capable of those type of plays. He's a raw kid, but the upside is there. Jump shot still very much a work in progress, but there's going to be a lot of coaches that look at him and just start to say, I can make it happen with that kid. I can get him right. I can get those post moves into him. I can get him finishing with both hands. So, wouldn't be surprising to see his recruitment continue to move in the right direction. Marquette's offered, a handful of other schools as well. So, I mean, he's a legit D1 kid. This isn't like someone we're talking about where you're waiting for him to make that jump to D1. I think he's established that already. And now it's, how high can he go? And then Josh Manchester, another in-state kid. Wisconsin has had him on their radar. He's visited it for a game. Really good shooter, a guy that can score in bunches. Not ultra athletic, but moves his body well, can get into the paint a little bit. He has a frame to add more good weight, to add strength. I think once he does that, you'll continue to see his game kind of move in the right direction. So I think someone that Wisconsin's going to keep tabs on. But when you watched him and you watch Wiggins, there's a gap there. And that's not a knock on Josh. I like him quite a bit. I really do. But a guy like Wiggins, a lot more polished, more explosive, likely translates a lot better to big time college basketball. But again, like the ceiling is there for Josh too. And it's going to be exciting to see what he can do in the next couple of years here as well.
Well, no matter what he does, we will have an eye on him over at BadgerBlitz.com. Thank you for tuning in to Badger Blitz TV. Make sure you subscribe not only to this channel, but also to BadgerBlitz.com for the best Badger insight and message boards anywhere on the internet or in the known universe. And again, thanks for tuning in. And until next time, we will see you in the den.